The Sovereign Economist here on the Texas Broadcasting Network. That's http:// actually it's / isn't it? TexasBroadcasting.net. We are the Sovereign Economist. I am Ralph Evans, your Sovereign Economist. It is the 24th day of March 2010. And as always at this time during the show, we're very privileged to have on and joining us again, Bob Chapman of the International Forecaster. And please, questions you have for Bob, you can email us at sovereign.economist@gmail.com, sovereign.economist@gmail.com. And I am going to put this little disclosure. If they're appropriate, I'll read them and take care and see that we get them answered for you. Bob, welcome back to the Sovereign Economist. Thank you for being here. Tell me what's new and exciting in your world and what you see happening that's most important we all should know about today.
Well, I think at the head of the news is something that everybody knows about, and that is we have a new medical reform plan.
Well, I don't know how much medical reform there is in there, but I know that they're calling it health care, and they think that it's the most momentous legislation we've passed in 50 years. My own sense is I like Drudge's report that said the day it was passed was a day which will live in infirmary. A takeoff on Franklin Roosevelt's comment about a day of infamy starting World War II. And somehow the parallels just seem to strike me right between the eyes, if you know what I mean. Bob, tell us a little bit about what you think this impact of this healthcare plan will have on the world's perception of the United States vis-a-vis our debt offerings and the financial picture. Obviously, there are a lot of problems going on in the world right now. We see more questions about the situation in Greece, and now I understand, Portugal, whose credit rating was lowered by Moody's, or was it Spain? I don't know. They're all going down sooner or later. But there's been a lot of turmoil over in Europe about what's happening there. In the meantime, the dollar soars, and everybody defines it as a safe haven to go into, which somehow seems, the dollar and safe haven somehow seems an oxymoron to me, but be that as it may, at what point do creditors around the world start looking at this profligate spending under the guise of health care and say, you know what, we've already been shying away from buying your debt, we need to just cut you off cold turkey? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, it's already begun. And that is that last month, which is February, the Japanese bought $300 million less of U.S. Treasuries, and the Chinese bought $5.8 billion less. The buying is coming from outside the country, but as I've been writing for a long time, that is not foreign buying. That is people standing in for the United States and doing the buying and the Fed supplying the money. And I believe they've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years, but they're doing it big time now. Last year, 80% of the treasuries were purchased by the Fed, and the Fed is a private corporation, and the Fed has the ability to make up money out of thin air. And so it's usually inflationary, and the reason we haven't seen more than the official rate of 2.5% to 3% inflation, the unofficial rate is 7.5%, the real rate. We don't have hyperinflation because of this big undertow of deflationary pull that is going on at the same time. As far as the dollar's strength, I knew something was up before it happened, and the reason I did is I knew what the long positions in the dollar were for J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, and a number of other banks. They were long. between 74 and 76 on the USDX, which is an index of 6 major stocks, 6 major currencies versus the dollar. And that was a recent low 2 months ago. It's now trading over 81. And so they knew this was coming. They were also very, very short gold and silver on the COMEX, and they had very, very large short positions in producing gold and silver companies. The people who study these sort of things knew that Greece was broke 10 years ago, and so was in Italy. And I believe Italy has leased all their gold out, incidentally, which is tantamount to selling it. And Goldman Sachs arranged for them to be able to produce 2 sets of books, essentially. And they use derivatives, and the derivatives are counted as capital as opposed to cash or the lack thereof. And the rest of the nations in the Eurozone, that's 14 countries at that time, 16 countries now in the Eurozone. In the European Union, there's 27, so the rest have their own currencies. And so everybody knew that these 2 countries should have never been included. But they were. And now here we are 10 years later, and it's coming home to roost. Greece's public debt versus GDP is 16%, headed to 22% by the end of the year. But all of the G20 countries, almost, are over 10%. What's normal? Under 3%. So you can see they're all offside. There's 19 countries that are bankrupt, and that includes the United States as well as England. And I think that they're going to keep Greece above water over the next 1.5 to 2 years. And they'll do that through IMF advances and an austerity program, which could very well lead to revolution in Greece, because they don't want to work. They want cradle to grave, the whole works, and then they're going to find out they can't do that. But anyway, that's where I see that going. Now, 1.5 to 2 years from now, there will be hundreds of countries that will join in the meeting, and they've had meetings like this before. The Smithsonian in the early 70s, and Plaza Accord of 85, the Louvre Accord of 87, and they're going to have multilateral devaluations of currencies, and they're going to have default settlement between countries. And after that, we'll have a deflationary depression accompanied by a war, another war, which will last for years. And that's where this is all headed. It's a setup. It was deliberately done. The dollar's up because it's supposedly a bankrupt country. Their currency is supposedly better than the euro. Incidentally, I think when that meeting is held and everything is leveled off, I think the Eurozone will break up and they'll go back to their own currencies that they had before. And I also think that there's a good chance that England and the United States will withdraw from WTO and NAFTA, and that England will withdraw from the European Union, and then they're going to put tariffs on. And that's the best thing that ever happened to both countries, believe me. And so that's the way I see things rolling out. As far as the medical is concerned, after the first of the year, because employers have to have insurance for employees, millions of people are going to be laid off. Millions. and many, many, many companies are going to close their doors. They create 80% of the jobs in the country. The year after this, by the end of next year, you'll be looking at 30 to 35, 40% unemployment.
That's
a direct result of this medical situation that they've supposedly passed. And I also think that in this process, if they do not supply stimulus, another $800 billion, and if the Fed does not put money back into the system, then what will happen is that this year, probably between 500 and 1,000 banks will go under. And this is deliberate.